Ever just, stop and think about how often someone's trying to convince you of something?
All the time, right?
Yeah. Like choosing a movie or when you're listening to a sales pitch. It's just constant.
It really is. And that's what we're diving into today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We do the heavy lifting, sifting through the complex stuff.
So you get the essentials. And today, it's the psychology of persuasion. It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. And for our map, we're looking at excerpts from Understanding the Psychology of Persuasion, Mastering the Key Principles for Effective and Ethical Influence by Self-Sensei.
A solid resource.
So our mission today, really, is to pull out those core ideas. What makes persuasion work? How do we spot it?
And how can we maybe use it ourselves effectively, but also, crucially.
How to tell when it crosses that line into manipulation, that's key.
Exactly. We want to give you the tools, that understanding, to navigate all those daily interactions with a bit more awareness, more confidence.
Okay, so persuasion. It's not just some, new marketing gimmick, is it? Feels older than that.
Yeah. Oh, much older. You can trace the serious thinking about it way, way back.
Like how far back?
Ancient Greece. Think Aristotle. His work, Rhetoric.
Ah, Aristotle. Okay.
Yeah, even thousands of years ago, he laid down some fundamental ideas about how we influence each other. Still relevant.
Wow. Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. What were Aristotle's big takeaways for winning people over?
Well, he talked about three main ways to appeal to an audience. He called them logos, pathos, and ethos.
Logos, pathos, ethos. Okay, sounds familiar from somewhere. Break those down for us.
Sure, so logos is the appeal to logic, reason.
Right, the facts and figures approach.
Pretty much, using clear arguments, evidence, making it all make rational sense. The idea is people are persuaded when something just clicks logically.
Makes sense. Laying it out clearly.
Exactly. Then there's pathos. That's the appeal to emotion.
Okay, the feeling side of things.
Totally. Connecting with the audience's emotions, joy, fear, anger, empathy, you name it. Aristotle knew that feelings are powerful motivators, often more powerful than pure logic, actually.
You definitely see that everywhere. Ads, politics.
Oh, constantly. What we feel often drives what we do.
Okay, and the third one, ethos. That one always sounded a bit academic.
Yeah, it can sound that way. But ethos is basically about credibility, the character of the speaker or the source.
So do people trust you? Do they see you as knowledgeable?
Precisely. Are you believable? Are you someone of good character? An audience is much more likely to listen if they trust the person talking. So who is saying it matters just as much as what they're saying?
Right. So even back then, it wasn't just the argument. It was the speaker, how they came across. Amazing how those ideas stick around.
They really are foundational pillars.
But things must have moved on since Aristotle, surely. We've got science now.
Absolutely. While Aristotle gave us the framework, the scientific study really kicked off in the early 20th century. Social psychology started digging in.
Using actual experiments and stuff.
Yeah, researchers started using scientific methods to figure out how communication changes attitudes and behavior.
And who are the big players in that shift?
Well, a really important early figure was Carl Hovland and his group at Yale, especially around World War II.
Okay, what did they focus on?
They broke persuasion down into key bits. The source who's talking, are they an expert? The message itself, and said is what's being said. How's it structured? The channel, how is it delivered? And the receiver who's listening, what do they already believe?
So like all the different parts of the conversation.
Exactly. They came up with that source message channel receiver model. It became a really influential way to think about it.
I see.
And, as psychology evolved, persuasion research started pulling in ideas from cognitive psychology, looking at memory, attention.
How our brains process it all.
Right. And even neuroscience more recently, looking at brain activity when someone's being persuaded.
Wow. From philosophy to brain scans, quite the evolution.
It really is.
Okay, so besides the history, the source gets into some key psychological theories too, right? Beyond Cialdini, who we'll definitely get to.
Yes, there are some important models that help explain the how.
Like what? Give us a couple of the big ones.
Well, one major area is what are called dual process models.
Dual process,
Okay.
meaning two ways it happens.
Essentially, yeah.
Mm.
The idea is we process persuasive messages in two different ways, depending on how motivated we are to think deeply about it, and if we have the mental energy, the ability.
Okay, tell me about these two ways.
Two big models here are the elaboration likelihood model, ELM, and the heuristic systematic model, HSM.
ELM and HSM.
Got it. Let's start with ELM.
Okay, ELM, from Petty and Cacioppo. It suggests two routes, a central route and a peripheral route.
Central and peripheral. Okay.
Think of the central route as the thoughtful one. If you really care about a decision, you're motivated, you'll carefully weigh the arguments, the evidence.
Right, like buying a car or something. You do the research.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And if you're persuaded this way, the attitude change is usually stronger, lasts longer, and it's harder to change later.
Okay. And the peripheral route.
That's more like the shortcut route.
Yeah.
If you're not that motivated, or maybe you're distracted, you don't analyze the arguments deeply. Instead, you rely on simpler cues. Cues like what?
Oh, things like how attractive the speaker is, or if they seem like an expert, or maybe just having a lot of arguments, even if they're weak, or even just a good mood.
Huh. So the actual message content isn't the main thing.
Right. And attitude changes through this route tend to be more temporary, easier to change later on. The key factors deciding which route you take are your motivation and your ability to process the information.
Makes sense. High stakes, deep thought, low stakes, easy cues. What about the other model, HSM?
The heuristic systematic model from Shelley Chaikin is pretty similar. It talks about systematic processing that's like the central route, analytical, thorough, and in heuristic processing, that's where we use mental shortcuts or heuristics, simple rules of thumb.
Like what kind of rules?
Things like experts know best, or if a message is long, it must be strong, or even people I like usually have good opinions. These let us make quick judgments without too much effort.
So both models basically say we have a thoughtful mode and a shortcut mode for dealing with persuasion.
Pretty much, yeah. It captures that reality really well.
Okay, what other big theories does the source mention?
Another really influential one is cognitive dissonance theory, Leon Festinger's idea.
Right, dissonance. That uncomfortable feeling.
Exactly. When you hold conflicting beliefs or your actions don't match your beliefs, you feel this inner tension, this discomfort.
And you want to get rid of it.
Precisely. That discomfort motivates you to change something, maybe your belief, maybe your behavior, to reduce that conflict. It's a powerful driver for change.
How does that play into persuasion then?
Well, a persuasive message can actually create that dissonance. Imagine someone who believes strongly in environmental protection but drives a gas guzzler.
Okay.
A message about the environmental impact of their car could create that uncomfortable feeling. To reduce it, they might start looking into electric cars or change their attitude about how bad their current car is. The message nudges them by creating that internal conflict.
Interesting. You create the problem, then offer the solution. What else?
Then there's social judgment theory. This one says we don't evaluate messages in a vacuum.
Okay, how do we evaluate them then?
We compare them to our existing attitudes on the topic. Our current stance is like an anchor point.
Right.
And around that anchor, we have a latitude of acceptance positions we find reasonable, a latitude of rejection positions we strongly disagree with, and maybe a latitude of non-commitment stuff we're neutral on.
So my existing opinion acts like a filter.
Exactly. Where a persuasive message falls in relation to these latitudes is crucial. If it's in your acceptance zone, great chance of success.
And if it's way out in the rejection zone?
It'll likely fail. It might even backfire the boomerang effect, making you dig your heels in even more on your original position.
Wow, so you need to know where someone stands already. Aiming for huge shifts might not work.
Often, gradual steps that fall within or near the latitude of acceptance are much more effective. It's about understanding the audience's perspective.
Makes total sense. Now, the source also quickly mentions a few other theories. Can we just briefly touch on those?
Sure. There's stimulus response theory, basically learning through rewards and punishments. Classical conditioning applied to persuasion.
Okay.
Inoculation theory, like a vaccine, giving people weak counter-arguments first makes them resist stronger attacks later.
Interesting. Perplexed.
Yeah. Attribution theory, how we figure out why people do things, including why a persuader is saying what they're saying. Their perceived motives matter.
Right. Are they genuine?
Theory of motivated reasoning, how our existing beliefs kind of steer how we process new info, often looking for confirmation.
We see what we want to see.
Pretty much. And finally, social influence theory breaks down responses into compliance, identification, and internalization.
Okay, compliance, identification, internalization. Let's hold that thought, because the source makes a point of separating persuasion from related ideas like compliance.
Yes. It's important to be clear on the differences. Persuasion isn't the same as compliance or conformity or coercion.
Why is that distinction so vital?
Because they work differently, and the ethics are really different.
Okay, let's nail these down. Compliance first. You mentioned it under social influence theory.
Great. Compliance is when you change your behavior
Hmm.
because someone asks you to, but you don't necessarily change your mind internally.
Like trying a free sample at the store. You
Hmm.
do it, but you might not suddenly love the product.
Exactly. You go along with the request, but your private attitude might not shift at all. It's outward behavior change.
Got it. What about conformity?
Conformity is about changing your behavior or beliefs to match others, to fit in with a group or social norms.
Peer pressure, kinda.
Often, yeah. Or just believing the group knows better. Think
Oh.
about fashion trends, or maybe laughing at a joke because everyone else is, even if you didn't get it.
Okay, going along with the group. And the last one, coercion. That sounds more forceful.
It is. Coercion uses force, threats, or takes away choice. It's making someone do something against their will.
So totally different from ethical persuasion.
Fundamentally, ethical persuasion respects autonomy, your freedom to choose. Coercion eliminates that choice. It's manipulation through force.
That's a really critical line. Okay, let's shift gears to someone whose name always comes up. Cialdini. His principles of persuasion.
Ah, yes, Robert Cialdini. His work is hugely influential.
The source says he started with 6 principles, now there are 7. What makes him so powerful?
They're powerful because Cialdini didn't just theorize. He went out, studied real-world salespeople, fundraisers, negotiators, people whose jobs depend on persuasion.
Right, the practitioners.
Yeah, and he identified these common psychological triggers, these shortcuts our brains use, that reliably lead people to say yes. They tap into deep-seated human tendencies and social norms.
So they often work without us even realizing it.
A lot of the time, yes, they're like automatic responses, which also means we need to think about the ethics of using them.
Definitely. Okay, let's walk through them. What's the first one?
The first is reciprocity. The simple idea that we feel obliged to give back when someone gives us something.
But I owe you one feeling.
Exactly. It's a very strong social norm. If someone does you a favor, gives you a gift, you feel this pressure to return it in kind.
How does that show up?
Everywhere. Free samples in stores, you feel a little more obligated to buy. A colleague helps you out, you feel you need to help them later. Even small things, like a mint with the restaurant bill.
Can increase tips, right? I've heard that.
It often does. In negotiations, making a small concession can encourage the other side to make one too. It's that instinct to repay.
Makes total sense. Okay, principle number 2.
Commitment and consistency. We have this deep need to be and to appear consistent with what we've already said or done.
We don't like to contradict ourselves.
Right. Once we make a commitment, especially if it's active, public, and feels voluntary, we feel this internal and external pressure to stick to it. It's about maintaining a consistent self-image and avoiding that cognitive dissonance we talked about.
So if you get someone to agree to something small first,
Ah, the foot in the door technique.
Yeah.
Exactly. Agreeing to a small request makes people much more likely to agree to a larger related one later because they want to stay consistent with that initial commitment.
like signing a petition, then being asked for a donation later.
Classic example. Or just telling someone you plan to do something makes you more likely to follow through.
That drive for consistency. Okay, number 3.
Social proof or consensus. This is the idea that we often decide what's appropriate or correct by looking at what other people are doing.
Everyone else is doing it.
So it must be okay.
Right.
Exactly. Especially when we're uncertain, we assume the crowd knows best, or at least knows something we don't.
Examples.
Oh, tons. Online reviews, bestseller lists, testimonials, and ads. Why do nightclubs sometimes make people queue outside even if it's empty inside?
To make it look popular. Social proof.
Bingo. We see a crowd, we assume something good is happening there.
Clever, if a bit manipulative sometimes. Number 4.
Authority. We are heavily influenced by people we perceive as legitimate authorities or experts.
Doctors, professors, police officers.
Right. We're taught from a young age to respect authority, so titles, uniforms, even fancy suits or credentials can trigger this almost automatic obedience or deference.
That's why advertisers use doctors to sell toothpaste.
Precisely. Or why we tend to listen to someone with doctor before their name on a particular topic. It's a shortcut. We assume they know what they're talking about.
Okay, that's 4. What's number 5?
Liking. Pretty straightforward. We're more easily persuaded by people we know and like.
Seems obvious, but why? What makes us like someone?
Cialdini points to a few things. Physical attractiveness, people tend to attribute other positive qualities to good-looking people. Similarity, we like people who are like us in terms of opinions, background, values, even little things. Compliments, genuine ones, work wonders. And familiarity or cooperation, just interacting positively with someone, increases liking.
So building rapport is key, finding common ground.
Absolutely. Think of the friendly salesperson who finds out you both support the same sports team. Or brands using likable celebrities. It builds that connection, that trust.
Makes sense. Okay, the sixth of the original principles.
Scarcity. Things seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited or seems limited.
The limited time offer. Feeling. Fear of missing out, FOMO.
Exactly. Scarcity creates urgency. It suggests something is in high demand or exclusive. The thought of losing an opportunity is a powerful motivator.
Only 3 left in stock. Sale ends Friday.
Yep. All scarcity tactics, they trigger that impulse to grab it before it's gone.
Okay, so those are the classic 6, but the source mentioned Cialdini added a 7th later.
He did. The 7th principle is unity.
Unity. How's that different from liking?
It's deeper. Unity is about a shared identity, feeling like you belong to the same group as the persuader, a sense of we-ness.
Like we're in this together.
Exactly. Cialdini calls it the shared me. It's about tapping into that fundamental sense of belonging, family, community, nationality, shared values, shared experiences.
So appeals to patriotism or family loyalty.
Those are powerful examples. Or think about brands that build a community around shared values, like environmentalism or a specific hobby.
Like Patagonia again.
Perfect example. They create unity with customers who share their environmental ethos. It fosters deep loyalty and influence. Even using insider language or creating exclusive groups builds that us feeling. It leverages our natural tendency to favor our in-group.
That's really interesting. It feels more fundamental than just liking someone.
It often is. That shared identity can be incredibly persuasive.
Now, do these principles work in isolation, or do they kind of team up?
Oh, they definitely team up. They often interact and reinforce each other.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a doctor that's authority who is also very warm and friendly, liking, telling you that a specific limited enrollment health program, Scarcity, aligns perfectly with the values of your community group, Unity.
Yeah. That's hitting multiple buttons at once.
Exactly. That combination is way more powerful than just one principle alone. Understanding how they combine is key, both for using them ethically and for spotting when multiple tactics are being aimed at you.
This is incredibly useful. But, as you said, powerful tools can be misused. Let's talk about that ethical line. Persuasion versus manipulation.
Yes, this is crucial. The source really emphasizes this distinction.
So what really separates ethical persuasion from, well, shady manipulation?
It boils down to about 3 main things: the persuader's intent, how transparent they are, and whether they respect the other person's autonomy, their freedom to choose.
Okay, let's take intent first. What's the difference there?
Ethical persuasion aims for a good outcome, ideally one that benefits everyone involved or at least is genuinely in the other person's best interest. Think mutual benefit, win-win.
Okay.
Manipulation, though, is usually driven by self-interest, often at the other person's expense. The manipulator wants something and they don't really care if it harms the other person.
Got it. Helping versus exploiting. What about transparency?
Ethical persuasion is honest. You're open about what you're trying to achieve, you provide relevant information, you don't hide things or twist facts.
So no deception.
Right.
Manipulation, on the other hand, often relies on deceit, half-truths, hidden agendas, misleading information to trick someone into agreeing.
Being upfront versus being sneaky. And the last one, autonomy.
This is fundamental. Ethical persuasion respects that the other person is free to say yes or no. There's no undue pressure, no threats. They make their own choice.
And manipulation.
Manipulation undermines that choice. It uses pressure tactics, exploits weaknesses, maybe creates a situation where saying no feels impossible or has negative consequences. The source puts it perfectly. An invitation one cannot refuse is not persuasion.
That really nails it. Wow. And being manipulated must have a real psychological impact, right?
Absolutely. People can feel used, betrayed, stupid for falling for it. It can really damage their self-trust and judgment.
And it probably destroys relationships.
Almost always.
Oh.
Research suggests manipulation might get you surface compliance, but it doesn't change underlying attitudes long term. And once someone realizes they've been manipulated, that trust is usually gone for good. Plus, it can be subtle, hard to spot initially. Nasty stuff. So how do we ensure we stay on the ethical side? The source mentions some frameworks.
It touches on things like virtue ethics, focusing on the character and intent of the persuader, and utilitarian ethics, aiming for the greatest good for the greatest number.
Oh, okay.
But a key practical element it stresses is empathy, really trying to understand the other person's needs, perspective, vulnerabilities. That helps avoid exploitation.
So putting yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. And clear, honest communication is vital. Avoiding jargon, being truthful, being transparent about your purpose.
Makes sense. Now, thinking about Cialdini's principles again, they seem ripe for misuse if someone lacks that ethical compass.
They absolutely are. Each one can be twisted.
Can you give some quick examples like, how could reciprocity be misused?
Manipulative gifting. Giving someone a small, maybe unwanted gift to make them feel obligated to agree to a much larger request later.
Creating unfair debt. What about scarcity?
Creating false scarcity. Fake deadlines, pretending something is limited when it's not, just to pressure people.
Yeah, you see that online sometimes. Authority.
Faking expertise. Pretending to have credentials or knowledge you don't possess to get people to trust you. Misrepresenting authority.
Commitment and consistency.
The unethical bait and switch. Luring someone in with a small commitment to one thing, then switching to a larger, less desirable one. Or using lowball tactics.
Nasty. Liking.
Insincere flattery. Pretending to like someone or share their interests just to build rapport and then exploit that trust.
Fake friendliness. Social proof.
Fake reviews, fabricated testimonials, making it seem like lots of people approve when they don't. Astroturfing.
Right. And unity. How can that be misused?
This one can be really dangerous. Exploiting in-group biases to turn people against an out-group, creating a false sense of us to manipulate people for harmful ends, like in extremist groups.
Wow, those are definitely things to watch out for. The source uses case studies to highlight this, right? Both good and bad examples.
Yes, real-world examples really drive the point home.
Let's start with the good stuff. Ethical persuasion successes.
Well, in business, the classic is Johnson & Johnson during the Tylenol poisoning crisis in the 80s.
What did they do?
They pulled everything off the shelves immediately, prioritizing safety over profit, and were incredibly transparent. It cost them a fortune short-term, but rebuilt massive trust long-term.
A brave, ethical move.
Definitely. Patagonia's Don't Buy This Jacket campaign is another, encouraging people to think about consumption, aligning with their environmental values. Very ethical marketing.
In leaders.
People like Howard Schultz at Starbucks or Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo, focusing on employee well-being, sustainability, using their influence ethically within big companies.
Good examples. What about outside of business? Public health or social movements?
Well, the source mentions things like the civil rights movement, environmental campaigns, #MeToo, all used powerful ethical persuasion, appealing to values, evidence, shared experience to create massive change.
Mobilizing people through moral arguments and social proof.
Exactly, and things like the Indian farmers' protest or the anti-apartheid movement using nonviolent communication, economic arguments, moral pressure effectively and ethically.
Inspiring stuff. Okay, now the darker side. Unethical manipulation examples.
Unfortunately, plenty of those too. Cults are a stark example.
Like Jim Jones and the People's Temple.
Exactly. They used intense manipulation, love bombing, isolation, controlling information, demanding total commitment, leading to horrific consequences, undue influence, fraud, ultimately mass death.
Chilling. What about in the corporate world?
Big scandals often involve massive deception, Volkswagen rigging emissions tests, Enron hiding debt through accounting fraud.
Huge financial and reputational damage there.
Absolutely. Nestle pushing infant formula unethically in developing countries, harming infant health. Or the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal misusing data for political manipulation.
So a clear pattern. Unethical manipulation leads to disaster eventually.
Almost always. Loss of trust, fines, legal action, ruined reputations, sometimes terrible human cost. Whereas ethical persuasion builds trust and lasting positive outcomes.
The source offers an ethical checklist to help people stay on the right side right. What kind of questions does it suggest?
Yeah, it's a good self-check. It asks you to think about your intent. Is it truly for mutual benefit? Transparency. Am I being fully open and honest? Autonomy. Is the other person genuinely free to choose? Respect. Am I avoiding any kind of exploitation? And impact. What are the likely consequences for everyone involved?
That sounds like a really practical tool for reflecting on your own approach.
It is. A good way to pause and check your motives and methods.
Okay, so we know how to try and be ethical persuaders. Now let's flip it. How do we defend ourselves against manipulation? The source talks about red flags.
Yes, knowing the warning signs is your first line of defense.
What are some key things to look out for?
Be wary if someone relies heavily on emotion but avoids logic or facts. High-pressure tactics trying to rush you into a decision that's a big one.
Act now or lose out.
Exactly. Lack of transparency, dodging questions, being vague, suspicious. attempts to isolate you from friends or advisors, playing on your insecurities,
Hmm.
inconsistencies in their story, oversimplifying complex issues, refusing to even consider other viewpoints, and watch out for gaslighting trying to make you doubt your own memory or sanity.
Those are serious red flags.
Mhm.
So just knowing about Cialdini's principles can help us defend against them.
Absolutely. If you understand how reciprocity works, you can pause when you get an unsolicited gift and ask, what's expected here? If you know about scarcity, you can question whether that limited time offer is real.
So awareness is key. What about our own mental shortcuts, our biases?
Knowing your own biases helps too. Like confirmation bias, we tend to look for info that confirms what we already believe. Manipulators can exploit that.
Or anchoring bias, getting stuck on the first piece of information.
Right. Or loss aversion, we hate losing more than we like gaining. Scarcity plays on that. Being aware of these tendencies makes you less likely to be automatically swayed by them. The source suggests specific defenses, like verifying social proof or scrutinizing authority claims.
So it's about activating our critical thinking. What practical steps can we take?
The source gives great advice here. First, just pause, especially if you feel pressured. Don't make snap decisions.
Give yourself breathing room.
Yes. Seek out different perspectives, multiple sources. Don't rely on just one voice. Question the source. What's their motive?
Right. Cui bono. Who benefits?
Exactly. Try to separate facts from opinions or emotional appeals. Focus on the logic, the evidence. Ask clarifying questions. Don't be afraid to challenge things.
And trust your gut.
Trust your gut, yes, but verify it. If something feels off, investigate why. And crucially, remember you always have the right to say no. You don't owe anyone agreement.
That's empowering.
And finally, self-awareness. Know your own values, your vulnerabilities, what pushes your buttons. That helps you recognize when someone might be trying to target them.
So it's not about being cynical about everyone, is it?
Not at all. It's about discernment. Being open to positive ethical influence while having the skills and awareness to protect yourself from unethical manipulation.
That's a really valuable balance to strike.
It really is. Look, persuasion is everywhere. It's complex. Understanding the psychology behind it isn't just about being more effective ourselves.
It's about responsibility.
Exactly. Ethical responsibility. And it's about resilience. Knowing this stuff helps build that. And ethical influence, used well, can genuinely create positive change, build better relationships, foster understanding.
So mastering persuasion ethically is really a lifelong process.
It is. It involves learning, reflecting, understanding ourselves, and committing to respect others.
A fantastic way to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you. So for you listening, maybe take a moment, think about your own experiences persuading, being persuaded.
Yeah, and maybe in your next conversation, try to be conscious of these dynamics, apply the principles ethically, and notice the tactics others might be using.
It's definitely an ongoing journey. Thanks for exploring the psychology of persuasion with us today.